people are mixing a lot. Like, you kind of, the way they were, drafted, the countries, unfortunately, due to the history, are kind of like arbitrary. And I think a lot of, yeah, exactly. This is what you see
Very
on the
strict
map
lines.
of Africa. But there is a lot of people moving, and then you have people kind of from two countries, which is kind of the new understanding. Oh yeah, actually, this shouldn't be the border. But anyway, so I do feel big differences. There are differences in the people, that how they are dressed, food. There are some similarities. So, funnily enough, when you go into supermarkets in one French-speaking African country and another, there will be similarities. Like, you will see a lot of things coming from Lebanon. Like, there is a lot of things coming from different locations that you wouldn't expect in Europe, that is importing, for example, like foodstuffs and things like this. So you see the similarities. The businesses are similar. That might be also other reasons, but differences are big. I think from my experience, which is probably a good experience, the way we were working in that one organization that I was in 3 different countries was obviously, like, this was probably the design, it was the same. It was very similar. And that kind of, I think, grounded me through these first months, when I was kind of like, almost kind of like my brain was exploding from from kind of everything around me. I think this was kind of difficult, but because I was working in the same organization that I knew, that had this matrix working. This is a big corporate organization. I think that was very helpful. So I felt kind of safe once, in front of my laptop and working. When I was finishing work, I was like, okay, so what do I do with myself now? It was completely different challenges, I would say.
Were your colleagues there from the country, or you had other expat colleagues in there? How was the environment?
Yeah, so that depends. For example, in Abidjan, it was a big office. And I would say 90% of people were local from Cote d'Ivoire. I started to understand, and this is something that you understand when you learn when you're working in West Africa or in Africa. There is also a part that was, like, I would say 5% or maybe more of people that were local but from neighboring countries. It's quite common because these are engineers, people that are skilled, that would come from other African countries that are not far. And that would be in any office, I would see it. So then you kind of understanding how the skills need to be pulled from other countries in order to fill in that specific, need. So there was always a lot of people from Nigeria and from Ghana. They were very skilled, a lot of engineers, a lot of people as well, I would say, from Senegal. So there will be some people. The first year I was working, I was sitting next to Manuel from Portugal. So I was next to his desk, and it was a big boss. So this was very useful for me in many ways. And there were also, so actually, I would say, from the non-African countries, one Portuguese person, there were two guys from Chile. And we were kind of the four, I would say, four white people, I guess. That's what we would say, non-Africans that were in that office. And we were doing, like, we would go out on Saturday, for example, to drive somewhere and stay and see something together. So I would not necessarily hang around because we weren't working together. But it was something that, like, me and Manuel, we are so close because he also arrived the next day, I think, after me, and it was his first role in that role as well. We're good friends. So it's amazing how things that are different outside brings you closer.
Mm. It's interesting. It sounds very similar. When I was in Germany, I worked for Deutsche Bank, which is also
Hmm.
like an enormous corporation at the end,
Yeah.
and most of our colleagues were expats. And when
Wow.
you think about it, we didn't have much in common, with a lot of the people. But the fact that you were new to a country and you were an
Yeah.
expat in there, and you were feeling the same or living the same experience, struggling with the same bureaucratical problems, willing to see the same, I don't know,
Hmm.
tourist spots maybe, or even like countryside or nature around where you were, unites us in a way that if we would have been going to school together, for example, we would not probably have been ending being friends or like being connected in a special way. That's the reality. But then suddenly, because you are in a country that you don't understand the language, you don't understand the culture, you are there lost, and you are getting together with the people who's passing through the same thing, no? Let's say like this. I wanted to ask you, because you said something about the contract itself. Like you said that you were sent there for a position of 2 years. Was that the case in all three countries, that you know that was for a limited amount of time?
Yeah, so I think I was sent there, I was given that role. I was told for 2 years, but in actual terms, I was given a non-determined contract, which was like permanent contract. That was advantageous to me, but I think was more related to what contracts the company wanted to use for many reasons, might be a lot of reasons. What did happen though, I did 1 year exactly in that role in Abidjan, and then as I was really, I wouldn't say hustling, but I was networking. I was trying to see where are the best places, like what is the most interesting in this company in here in that region. And I managed to, I mean, it's maybe easier actually than in Europe to meet a lot of people and get to know a lot of people from other countries that were working within the same organization. And I applied for the sales role. So I was in a proposal manager role. It was kind of more commercial, but behind the scenes, looking at the biggest deals and working together with the team. It wasn't me in front of the customer, and I wanted to be in front of the customer. You know, as I was saying, I had this strong feeling, like this feeling, I was convinced that I will be so good in front of the customer. And Ericsson teams weren't so sure. They were like, she's not from here. Like they were kind of, it wasn't so easy. I had to really convince people and make proof of it and bring customers like almost from the street so that they kind of want to give me a shot. And I applied at that time for the account manager role in DRC. And it was coincidental that they were actually wanted to change an account manager. And actually, at the same week, I just randomly contacted this person. He had to find someone, so she was like, "How does she know this? Let's see." And I had internal interviews. There was another person applying for it, but I think part of it was I was already very close. I was already working in French, so there are those things as well that were playing. So I moved to a different role within a sales organization, really directly with the customer. And at that time, obviously, I moved to Kinshasa from Abidjan. So I moved to Democratic Republic of the Congo. Yeah, very exciting
Nice.
times.
Interesting. I let you talk because I find it.
Yeah, it was very exciting. I remember I was landing. I was first time, so I was first time traveling to Kinshasa for the role. So I knew, it's kind of scary, but that happened every time with me. You're landing somewhere and you will be staying there, and you can't just test, see, do I like it? No, you're landing there, you have all of your luggage, and you have to prove yourself, and you have certain targets and people to meet immediately and perform to the highest kind of standard of this organization. So I think it was tricky, but I think the fact that I had this role that I had to perform, I think for me, for my personality, it was helpful. I was focusing on that and those small things that I was like, how do I solve all these problems? People around me and noises, how to find a flat and, things that are becomes complicated when you're not from the location. Like, especially I would say on on the African continent, I had some help. There was the help of the company. I had 3 months of the, accommodation organized, and there were some other things. But then, there are things that they don't organize. They're not organizing, and your free time, your friends, you know, you you don't necessarily in Kinshasa. It's a great, very dynamic city, very big. However, you don't have the same level, obviously, like London or any bustling city with a lot of single people, people that want to, go out, that want to eat out, that don't want to see this thing. It's very different dynamics. So there is a small area normally that you would be able to go out, but then after a month, you know this area of the city, and this is the place you can go out. And there are a few places, and then you start seeing the same people, which has its own, great sides, but it's very different. It shifts you so much. Your life become very different. Like
Of course.
really.
I mean, that's now that we are talking already about challenges and surprising moments. I had a couple of questions about exactly that. Like, how did you make friends in there? How did you make personal connections with the locals? Even like I don't know if
Mm.
you live really in a bubble. Other guests that I had, they describe it very much like you are in a protected place, and then you live in there. You move out only in district. What you were saying, no, like in designated areas. And how was it?
I think it was a little bit like this, and it wasn't with me. So there were a few things. So obviously there were my colleagues that I was working with, and they were in my office. And through the years, I would get closer to some and not so close to others. And I think there is this thing again that colleagues that were from another country, we kind of would be. They would be all Africans, but we would get closer. And I'm still very close with a lot of people, just because maybe they didn't have so many family members next to them. I think it's part of that. People that were really from the city, from that town or a village somewhere nearby, they would have so many, I think, personal time spent with different things, organizing things for the families. I think part of that was that they weren't as available. And, otherwise, people that had their families a bit farther away, or they might have small family, but they weren't so busy. I think I was able to build with them great friendships. Um, I think there was a challenge though. So, I would not have so many friends. So, just to give you an example, in Abidjan, I had one friend, very good Senegalese from my office, very, very good friend of mine. We worked together and we did a lot of things together as well, but we were kind of similar. I was outside, she was also on her own, and we were kind of spending our time together. And other than that, I had another friend from Luxembourg, Marie-Laure, who was coming in exactly the same time as me. She was coming to EY, so also kind of like a expat totally. She was coming on her own from Europe, and then we became like, we were always together. We would meet every day, Mark. Every day. Like, this is not possible in London, right? You don't do that in Paris or in
No, no,
London.
no.
So it's a very different dynamic. And it's almost like we always had something to talk about. We always had somewhere to go and eat. And there were so many things that we were doing together that would never happen to us, like police chasing us, like people chasing us, some random guys chasing us, like everything was kind of funny, but on the spot sometimes things were very different. We had to we were working, I think, together. We were together because it was easier, like things were, when we were two, we were kind of not necessarily safer, but kind of stronger. So it was different. I didn't have number of people, friends, acquaintances. I would just have acquaintances, I would say, from the office, friends from the office and friends outside. I think what I did develop, and this was exceptional related to the role that I had, was that starting from the moment I moved to Kinshasa, I was account manager leading the account. So I was the representative of the company and also entertaining a customer or customers. So that meant that I was going out and inviting customers a lot.